Thomas was standing in the hallway of the hospital, watching his ill-dying wife carried into the ambulance. He stared after her, not believing that such a burden would be upon his shoulders. He stared and stared until the doctor's voice interrupted him from his troubled thoughts. Thomas looked at the elderly, vivacious man in the white coat and did not understand the words. The doctor seemed to move his lips silently, and Thomas tried unsuccessfully to understand what he was saying. The man looked sternly at the patient's husband as if he realized that he could not hear what he was saying. "Can you hear me all right? Look, we've done all we can. Your wife is dying. Let her spend her last days with a man who loves her. Just be there for her, that's all she asks for. And who knows, maybe God will have mercy. Her name is Anastasia, and for good reason," said the doctor. He was quiet for a while, and then he kept talking. "I would advise you not to hire a nurse. She has a couple of weeks left at most." The doctor left, and only the smell of medicine hung in the air. Thomas looked towards the ambulance again. They were waiting for him. From there, everything happened as if it were a nightmare. The man watched as the car pulled up to his apartment building. They brought his wife into the apartment and left her on their marital bed. It had been 2 hours since the ill-dying wife had been brought to his apartment. There is no way Thomas could come to terms with it. "Thomas, my darling, come to me," his wife pleaded hoarsely, but her husband did not come. "Thank you, my darling, for taking me in and sheltering me. I really want to die next to you in our apartment where we were happy," she coughed with a deep, gurgling sound. He covered his ears with his palms and plopped down on the chair. It squeaked loudly. He wanted to make some sound, but failed. Thomas spread out the couch and went to sleep. I hope my wife won't survive the trip and die by morning, but his hopes were not destined to come true. Thomas awoke an hour before the alarm clock. He made himself some coffee and went into the bedroom. His wife was asleep, breathing. Somehow, this fact angered him so much that he could barely restrain himself from screaming. He was shaking all over with anger. He dashed into the kitchen and threw the mug against the wall. The brown liquid dripped in large stains over the sturdy tiles which didn't show a scratch. The man exhaled heavily and cried. He sat back in his chair, tears of helplessness and hopelessness streaming silently from his eyes. It had been so good to finally have her in the hospital. I could start a new life. Thomas was so deeply immersed in his own thoughts that he shook with resentment, impotence, and anger. He was quick to react when the doorbell rang, and he literally ran to the door and swung it open. "What took you so long?" a young beauty holding 2 large cups of coffee to go asked quietly. "Mine came back," the man said quickly in a whisper. He looked around anxiously, though he knew his wife would not be able to get up on her own. He stared at his young lover, who shrugged and entered the apartment as if nothing had happened. She had settled in during the time Thomas's wife had been in the hospital. The girl walked into the kitchen, and Thomas became indignant. "What are you doing? What you yourself said, she was ill, badly, that she was dying. Then she won't get up. Come here, I missed you," said Chloe quickly in a loud whisper as she huddled close to the man. She kissed him so fearfully that he could not resist. When they were done, he had to go to his wife's bedroom, sending the girl in the meantime to the shower. Thomas brought his wife a glass of water, gave her the pills, and went into the shower, continuing to have fun. Then they came up with a plan to get rid of Thomas's spouse. He anticipated that soon he would be alone with this beautiful woman, and he could do whatever he wanted. Again, his wife would leave him all her property, and she had a lot of money. She had worked hard all the time, so after her death, he and his new bride would not have to work at all. The girl left, leaving Thomas alone with his dying wife. Thomas began to pack her things. Thomas stuffed the bag full and slid it into the car. After laying out in the back seat in the car, he draped a thick blanket over it and then returned to the apartment and went right in to see his wife. She literally lit up with happiness when she saw him. "My darling, I missed you so much." "It's good to have you with me," the woman said, smiling faintly, for she had no strength for anything else. "Stacy, listen, I know someone who can help you. If we have no hope for medicine, we'll cure ourselves. I'll take you to a healer, and he'll help you." Thomas lied briefly as he went, trying not to look into the faded, almost colorless eyes. Thomas took his wife in his arms and carried her to the car. She weighed almost nothing. It was as if her body consisted of nothing but bones. Thomas was disgusted to even hold her in his arms, nauseated by the smell of the pills that soaked into her skin. He moved her to the back seat, covered her with the plaid. The man started the car, and the car drove off out of town. They drove for more than 4 hours until they were in the deep woods. He first wanted to leave her between the dense trees, but then an abandoned old house caught his eye. Apparently, it belonged to a Jaeger or some local ascetic. Thomas took his wife in his arms and carried her into the house. He left her on the big bed and left without a word. Stacy understood that he was leaving her in this old house. She understood that her husband was never coming back. He laid her on the bed, and tears ran from her eyes of despair and understanding that she would starve to death here all alone. She looked thin, but Thomas averted his eyes. He too understood that it had all become clear to her. A man came out outside the window, the engine of the car started, and the car disappeared. Anastasia lay on a huge bed, crying, unable to turn around or get up. Her mouth was dry, her whole body ached, and she was desperate to go to the bathroom, but no one else could help her. Stacy slipped into oblivion and then woke up again, but at some point, she realized she was not alone in the house. "Here, have a drink. Drink this, it will make you feel better," said a man, his face blurring before her eyes. Anastasia took a few sips but couldn't go any further. Then the man lifted her head with his broad palm and helped her finish the potion. She felt herself falling back into sleep. Stacy woke up a long time later. That's when she saw that she was being cared for by a man with a beard. He walked up to her, smiled, and said, "Good morning, you finally come to your senses, and I always said, nature heals all things." She really did feel as good as she had never felt in the last 4 years of her illness. There was no pain, everything was clear in her eyes. She even felt that she could breathe with her full breath. "My husband brought me here, he wanted to leave me. The doctors gave me up, and then my husband gave me up. I thought I was going to die here alone," Anastasia confessed a little haphazardly. You won't die now if the potions help. I've been looking after you for 2 months now. I thought you weren't going to make it, but you clung to life as best you could. You won't fall into that kind of oblivion now, you see? You'll be back on your feet in a few weeks, just don't be afraid. I've got a dog that's been sleeping up here with you the whole time. You may not remember him, but he's good and kind. Buddy is his name. He stayed with you when I went into the woods," said the man with a smile. "Your husband is a bastard. Marriages are made in heaven. This is the test God sent you." "Excuse me, why do you live in the woods?" Stacy said suddenly, determined to change the subject. "Me? I'm a pauper. I got fired from my job. Collectors took my house, so I had to beg in town. That's where I met Buddy, and then I went into the woods and came across this house. I built up relations with the local villagers and helped them out in exchange for food. That's how I got settled in. I've been living here for 2 years now. I'd be glad to go back to people, but I have no money and no opportunity," the man said with a sad smile. They talked until the wee hours of the morning, so week after week went by, and along with gratitude, love blossomed in Anastasia's soul. They understood each other at a glance. Stacy had never felt so happy. But one day, when she was all healed up, she decided to leave. He let her go, even though he didn't believe she would ever come back. Stacy was too beautiful for him, too well off to spend the rest of her life with a beggar somewhere in the backwoods. He drove her to the village, and there he drove her to town. The first thing Anastasia did was go to her lawyer, and the nightmare began. It turned out that her husband had almost registered her as dead. There were only a few days left for the court verdict to be pronounced, but Stacy made the effort and fought for days. The judgment was overturned. Then Stacy withdrew all the money from her account and bought a nice house in a local community with good infrastructure. She got her car back, which her husband had mortgaged, but she never showed it to him. Stacy immediately got behind the wheel and drove into the middle of nowhere, to that house. When Joseph came out, he was happy to see his beloved missing for 2.5 weeks. "Get your things together, I bought us a house. And take Buddy, there's a big yard. And don't be embarrassed, you saved my life, and I will give us a new house," she said jubilantly, hugging the man she loves. By evening, they were already in the new modern cottage, enjoying every minute they spent together. Stacy still could not believe that not only had she survived there in the deep woods, but also that she had met her happiness. When Thomas received the divorce suit, he could not believe his eyes. It had been 6 months since he had taken his wife to the woods to die. He didn't even immediately realize what was going on. He appeared in court and was dumbfounded to see his healthy, beautiful wife next to a large, handsome man who was hugging her like a big bear. For Thomas, the process of divorce was like a nightmare. He looked at the court order and couldn't believe that he was left destitute. His wife's account, his wife's apartment, even the old summer house belonged to his wife, and he was left with no job, no education, completely unfit for an independent life. Naturally, that girl had long since left him, having found a nicer place to live. He rushed from his seat to his spouse to beg forgiveness, but the big man was blocking the frail Anastasia. Thomas dared not act. He backed away, seeing the handsome couple off. It was over. Thomas was so happy when he finally left his wife to dying in the woods. He was so happy having fun with his young chosen one. The man thanks fate every day for such a wonderful plan. And now what? Now he would have to go back to his mother and live with her until he could get his life together. Thomas assessed the situation rationally and realized that he would not be able to get a job and would be dependent on his mother. It was a warm late summer evening. Anastasia sat on a wide bench in the garden, her head resting on the man's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close to him, and Stacy felt that she had never been happier. Stacy looked at her soon-to-be husband and thanked him for saving her life. If not for him, she would have died out there in the woods. He looked at her and thanked her for her love, for her home, for her new job, and for her happiness. If it hadn't been for her, he would have spent his years alone in the woods. It was as if they had been destined for each other. The lovers sat in the garden, breathing in the scent of the flowers after the rain. They just enjoyed each other and were happy that they could be together. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.